It wasn't the missing turkey or the untouched desserts that made the Crosswell family's Thanksgiving unforgettable. It was the deafening silence that filled the room when the food never arrived. Seated at a table set for 20, with candles flickering above empty plates, Gerald Crosswell's voice cracked as he called his eldest daughter Laura, hoping for answers. But Laura, sipping apple cider in her cozy Asheville apartment, already knew the answer. She hadn't been invited. At 38, Laura had spent her life as the dependable one. Growing up in Raleigh, she wasn't just the oldest sibling, she was the family's emotional caretaker and financial crutch. From managing carpools to quietly covering bills, she played the thankless role of helper, not guest. So when her cousin messaged her with a casual, "Wait, are you actually coming?" Laura's world tilted. Her parents had told everyone she wouldn't be at Thanksgiving. They decided without a word that this year would be just immediate family. But she was immediate family, and ironically, the one who had paid for the entire meal. Though Laura was erased from the guest list, her credit card wasn't. She had prepaid for the boutique-catered feast, the exact dishes her mother loved. The realization struck hard. Not only had they excluded her, they had used her. That quiet Thanksgiving wasn't just a mishap in planning. It was a moment years in the making, where Laura stopped being the silent supporter and began reclaiming her voice. The moment Laura Crosswell canceled the Thanksgiving catering, she wasn't being vindictive. She was reclaiming something she had given away for far too long, her power. For years, Laura had played the dependable daughter role to perfection. At 38, she was the oldest of three, the one who handled emergencies, paid unspoken debts, and made sure every family celebration went off without a hitch. Thanksgiving had always been one of those events, not so much a time for warmth and gratitude, but a carefully staged performance of unity held together by unspoken rules and well-rehearsed smiles. Behind the scenes, however, Laura had become the family's unofficial event planner, therapist, and checkbook. Weeks before the holiday, her father, Gerald, had asked her to chip in for the Thanksgiving meal. As always, Laura had done more than chip in. She had paid for everything. She placed the orders herself from the boutique butcher her mother adored, and the bakery her family swore made the best pumpkin cheesecake in the state. Every dish, every bite was thoughtfully chosen, but what her family didn't know was that Laura had put everything under her name. And then came the message in the family group chat, a cheerful, "Can't wait to see everyone," from her Aunt Dana. Laura responded warmly, assuming her invitation was understood, but the silence that followed said otherwise. Hours later, a private text from her cousin Micah delivered the truth her parents told everyone: she wasn't invited this year. Confused and hurt, Laura called her mother, who casually explained that they were keeping it small this year, just immediate family. The words stung. "I am immediate family," she'd whispered, voice tight with disbelief. The reason they wanted less tension, her mother claimed. But Laura knew better. The tension her parents spoke of had only surfaced when she stopped bending over backward to fix everyone else's problems, when she said no to paying for her brother's new tires, or refused to cover the unpaid wedding balance her sister left behind. That moment of clarity, of being deliberately excluded while still being used, was the breaking point. Laura didn't scream. She didn't beg for a seat at the table. Instead, she picked up the phone. One call to the butcher, another to the bakery, and within minutes her orders were canceled and refunded. Quietly, with purpose, she erased her contribution. When the food failed to show up on Thanksgiving Day, the panic was immediate. Gerald called, his voice sharp with confusion. Laura answered, calm and collected. "Oh," she said lightly, "maybe check with whoever placed the order." Silence followed. Then came his angry realization she had placed the order. She let the silence stretch before replying. "I didn't think you needed anything from me." Across town, chaos unfolded. No turkey, no sides, no desserts. Her sister, trying to impress a new boyfriend, ended up crying in the guest room. Her mother locked herself in the bathroom. Her father sat stunned while Uncle Bill asked, "Wasn't Laura bringing the turkey?" That was the moment it hit them. Not just that they had no meal, but that the one person they pushed away had been the one holding it all together. Laura's decision wasn't about revenge. It was about finally refusing to be invisible. For the first time, her absence had weight. In choosing not to show up, Laura made herself seen. She let the empty plate speak for her, and in that silence, she rewrote the story, one where she was no longer the daughter waiting to be chosen, but the woman who chose herself. When Laura Crosswell canceled Thanksgiving dinner, she expected shock, maybe even anger. What she didn't expect was to be labeled unstable. But in her mother's world, image was everything. And when that image cracked, she didn't fix it. She rewrote the story. In the days following the food fiasco, Laura stayed quiet. Her phone lit up with calls and texts from family, some confused, some accusatory. Her mother, Marilyn, remained silent until 3 days later when she sent a family group text that read, "We really missed you at Thanksgiving. Hope we can put this behind us." It wasn't an apology. It was a rug, one she expected Laura to crawl under, but Laura didn't respond. Soon, Aunt Dana called her voice low. "Your parents are spinning the story, saying you're unstable, that you deliberately sabotaged the holiday." Laura's jaw tightened. Not only had they cut her out and used her money now, they were painting her as emotionally unwell, a dangerous but familiar pattern. When Laura stopped absorbing their dysfunction, they turned her into the problem. It escalated quickly. Her mother whispered to relatives that Laura had always been a bit sensitive, that she'd had episodes before. Her father, Gerald, called and accused her of humiliating Marilyn, never once acknowledging what had been done to her. "We made a mistake," he said, "but what you did was low." Laura's laugh was short and bitter. "You excluded your own daughter, took her money, and then told everyone I wasn't invited, and I'm the one who went low." What hurt the most wasn't the betrayal. It was how quickly her mother tried to rewrite the truth. Marilyn wasn't interested in healing or resolution. She was interested in control. And when that control slipped, she did what she always did, discredit the opposition. Laura's strength was a threat. Her refusal to stay quiet made her dangerous. So Marilyn did what many manipulators do. She called it a breakdown. That way she didn't have to answer for her actions. She didn't have to admit she was wrong. She just had to convince everyone Laura was fragile. The first time Laura heard it from someone outside the family was from a friend of her cousin's. "I heard you had a bit of a meltdown over Thanksgiving," they said. That was the moment Laura realized how far her mother's lie had spread. Not just a whisper, but a full-blown narrative campaign. It was chilling and familiar. As a child, whenever Laura questioned things, she was labeled overdramatic. When she cried, she was too sensitive. When she disagreed, she was difficult. Now, as an adult, those same tactics were being weaponized to silence her again. But this time, Laura didn't shrink. She didn't plead for understanding. Instead, she did something more powerful. She exposed the truth. Christmas Eve. Laura showed up at her parents' house uninvited with her grandmother, the same woman her mother had tried to erase from the family for years. The moment Marilyn opened the door, her face drained of color. The matriarch had lost control, and the woman she'd branded unstable was standing tall beside the very person she'd sworn would never cross the threshold again. Later that night, Laura's mother tried again, telling family that Laura had lost it, that she was unpredictable, unstable. But Laura had already shifted the power. The truth had been spoken out loud in front of witnesses, and no amount of backpedaling could erase the clarity of that moment. For the first time, the family saw the woman behind the curtain, not just Laura's mother, but the manipulator, the image-obsessed woman who would rather ruin her daughter's reputation than admit she was wrong. Laura didn't win with rage or revenge. She won with truth, quiet, unwavering truth that shattered decades of lies. The woman they called unstable, she was the only one finally standing on steady ground. By the time Christmas rolled around, Laura Crosswell had no intention of stepping foot in her parents' house. After being shut out of Thanksgiving, used financially, and then smeared as unstable, she figured it was best to stay away from the drama. But then, Aunt Dana called with a quiet warning. Your mom's telling everyone you're too fragile to be around family, that you're skipping Christmas because you can't handle conflict. That wasn't just a lie, it was a challenge. So Laura made a decision. She wouldn't just show up for Christmas, she'd bring a surprise that would speak louder than any argument. Her mother, Marilyn, had spent years pretending her own mother didn't exist. After a long ago falling out, she'd cut Laura's grandmother, Evelyn, completely out of their lives, never speaking her name, never allowing so much as an old photo in the house. But Evelyn had never cut ties with Laura. Over the years, they'd stayed in touch quietly. Letters, calls, the occasional visit. Evelyn knew all about the family dynamics, and when Laura told her what happened at Thanksgiving, she didn't hesitate. I'd love to come, she said. It's time. So on Christmas Eve, Laura pulled into her parents' driveway in Asheville, heart-thudding. The air was crisp, heavy with the scent of pine and winter. She walked to the front door, rang the bell, and smiled calmly when her father opened it, his bourbon glass half raised in surprise. Behind him, the room fell into silence. Her sister stopped mid-conversation. Her mother's expression froze. Laura stepped inside like she belonged there because she did. Merry Christmas, she said, tugging off her scarf, and then she stepped aside. Hi, dear Evelyn said cheerfully, her voice warm and full of mischief. It's been a long time. The reaction was instant. Marilyn's face lost all color. She stumbled backward a step, stunned into silence. The room had been decorated in perfect holiday style, garlands, candles, the works, but in that moment, all anyone saw was the woman they thought they'd never see again. Dinner that night was a tense masterpiece. Evelyn played the perfect guest, cheerful and sharp-dropping, subtle zingers that only Laura truly appreciated. This stuffing tastes very consistent, she said, with a twinkle in her eye. Must be store-bought. Laura bit her cheek to keep from laughing. Her mother sat stiff-forced to keep up appearances, while her past sat across the table, smiling sweetly. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. Laura didn't have to yell or argue. She just had to show up with the one person her mother had banished long ago. In that single act, Laura exposed the cracks in her mother's perfect facade, because no one could pretend things were normal when the ghost of family truth was sitting at the table passing the gravy. The aftermath was swift. By the next day, Laura's phone buzzed with messages. Some cousins reached out gently. Heard there was a misunderstanding. Hope you're okay. Others more blunt. Didn't know you had it in you to be that cruel. But Laura didn't flinch. She knew what really happened. Aunt Dana confirmed it. Your mom's telling everyone you had a breakdown, she said, that what you did at Christmas proves it. Laura just laughed. If Christmas was supposed to be about family, then this one finally was. The right family. Not the ones who manipulated and controlled, but the ones who stood beside her without conditions. That night, Laura sat alone in her apartment, her tree glowing softly beside her, and felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because everyone suddenly understood, but because for the first time she didn't need them to. When Laura Crosswell walked into her parents' house for Sunday dinner, the air was thick with tension, heavier than any holiday roast could have ever been. It had been weeks since the Thanksgiving debacle and the shocking Christmas comeback, and now her parents had asked to meet. Not to apologize. Oh no. They said they wanted to talk in person. But Laura knew what that really meant: control the damage, reclaim the story. She stepped into the dining room with her head held high. Her father, Gerald, stood stiff near the end of the table. Her mother, Marilyn, sat at the head, arms crossed, lips pursed, looking every bit the judge ready to issue a verdict. Her sister, Melissa, stared at her phone, pretending to be invisible. Her brother, Evan, sat on edge, glancing nervously between everyone. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Marilyn snapped. Laura tilted her head. "Which part are you mad about, canceling the turkey bringing Grandma to Christmas? Or just the fact that people stopped believing your version of the story? You're so dramatic," her mother hissed, eyes flashing. Then her father stepped in, voice low and tight. "Your mother's hurt, and you've done nothing but make her look bad." Laura didn't flinch. "She made herself look bad," she said calmly. "I just stopped covering for her." Marilyn's face flushed. The truth she spat. "You mean your version of events?" Laura didn't blink. "You uninvited me. You let me pay for everything. Then you pretended I didn't exist. And when people asked, you called me unstable." Her mother fired back with the same refrain she'd been using since Thanksgiving. "We just thought it would be easier, less tension." Less tension for who, Laura demanded. "You tried to erase me and hoped no one would notice." It was then that Evan finally spoke, quiet but firm. "Mom, you did exclude her. You told everyone she wasn't coming. You let her pay for everything. That was wrong." Marilyn turned to him, shocked. "Oh, don't you start too." But Evan didn't back down. "You always do this when you feel cornered. You lie, and then you make us lie with you." Gerald shifted uncomfortably. We should have handled it differently." "What does that mean?" Marilyn snapped. "It means," Gerald muttered, "maybe she has a point." The room went still, but Laura wasn't finished. "You didn't just leave me out. You called around telling people I was having a breakdown." "Why, Mom?" There was a long pause, and then Marilyn said it, "Because I was embarrassed." It fell out of her like a confession she hadn't even processed until it passed her lips. "I didn't know what to say when people asked. It snowballed. I didn't want to be the villain. So you made me the villain?" Laura asked, voice low. Marilyn didn't answer, but beside her, Gerald looked at her like he didn't even recognize her. Melissa muttered under her breath, "Wow." And just like that, the facade cracked. The years of manipulation, control, and rewriting the narrative laid bare. For the first time, everyone saw Marilyn not as the unshakable matriarch, but as a woman terrified of being wrong. Laura stood up. "I'm done. I don't need an apology. I don't even think you're capable of giving one. But I need you to understand, I'm done playing the part you wrote for me." Her mother reached out, desperate. "Wait, no, you don't get to walk away like that." Laura shook her head. "You shut me out, and when people noticed, you rewrote the story. But this time, I kept the receipts." And with that, she walked out, not as the scapegoat, not as the problem, but as the one who finally told the truth. After that fateful Sunday dinner, Laura Crosswell didn't wait for another confrontation. She didn't hope for apologies that would never come or chase validation from a family that only valued her in silence. Instead, she did something radical. She chose distance, not out of spite, but out of necessity. In the weeks that followed, The once bustling family group chat fell eerily quiet, except for the occasional shallow text from her mother. "Can we move past this?" Marilyn wrote one morning. No acknowledgement of the pain, no ownership of her actions, just a vague request to move on as if none of it had happened. Laura left it on read. She was done sweeping things under rugs just to make everyone else comfortable. Instead of fighting for a seat at a table where she'd never truly been wanted, Laura focused on the people who had stood by her. Aunt Dana checked in regularly, her voice steady and warm. "I'm proud of you," she'd said one evening over the phone. "You finally said the things the rest of us were too afraid to say." And then there was Grandma Evelyn. A week after Christmas, Laura received a handwritten letter from her, a soft folded piece of stationery that smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. "I've seen what they've done to you," Evelyn wrote. "But I've also seen the strength it took to walk away. That's not weakness, sweetheart. That's courage." It was the kind of affirmation Laura had never gotten from her parents. But more importantly, it was enough. Then something unexpected happened. One chilly evening in mid-January, Laura's phone buzzed with a message from her younger brother, Evan. "Want to grab coffee?" It was simple. No drama, no expectations. They met at a quiet cafe in West Asheville, tucked between a used bookstore and an old record shop. Laura hadn't realized how much she missed her brother until he walked in, hands shoved in his coat pockets, guilt written all over his face. "I don't agree with what Mom did," he said, voice unsure. Thanksgiving felt off, but Christmas, that's when it all clicked. Laura didn't interrupt. She let him speak. Evan admitted that he'd kept quiet for years, choosing peace over truth. But after seeing what happened to her and how their mother spun the story, he couldn't keep ignoring it. "I'm not saying I handled it right," he said softly. "But I don't think you're crazy, not even close." Those words hit Laura harder than she expected. Her throat tightened, and she had to look away for a moment. For so long, she had been the villain in her family's narrative. To hear someone finally acknowledge the truth that she wasn't broken, just honest, meant more than she could say. They talked for hours, about childhood memories, about the patterns they now recognized, about how easy it had been to believe the myth their mother had built. And for the first time, Laura didn't feel alone. That conversation didn't magically fix everything. It didn't undo the pain or erase the past. But it cracked something open, a new path, one where Laura no longer had to carry the weight of her family's silence alone. In the days that followed, she still received the occasional vague text from her mother. But she no longer felt the pull to respond. The quiet was no longer emptiness. It was space to breathe. By choosing distance, Laura didn't just protect herself, she reclaimed her life. And sometimes the most powerful healing comes not from mending what's broken, but from walking away and building something better, something honest, something hers. Laura Crosswell didn't just walk away from a family dinner. She walked away from years of being the scapegoat. For decades, she'd been labeled too sensitive, too dramatic, or too much for simply speaking the truth. When she finally stood her ground, canceling Thanksgiving, revealing family secrets at Christmas, and refusing to accept shallow apologies, something powerful happened. Her voice got louder, even in silence. She didn't do it for revenge. She did it to protect her peace. The empty chair she left at the Thanksgiving table, that wasn't a sign of loss. That was freedom, a quiet rebellion against the role she had been forced to play for far too long. And in that empty space, a new version of herself emerged, one that no longer needed to beg for love that came with conditions. Sometimes, walking away from the wrong table is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. You are not required to stay anywhere you're constantly being diminished. Peace is not passive, it is powerful. And setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Let's talk. Have you ever been the black sheep at your family table or had to choose peace over tradition? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And don't forget, if this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Laura's journey may be complete, but yours might be just beginning.